Your first draft is done and you feel this weird mix of emotions. Relief because it's over, but also stress because it didn't turn out as clean as you were hoping it would. In this video, I'll teach you everything you need to know to clean up your prose and your story and make your work something you can genuinely be proud of. The first piece of advice, especially if you're not done your first draft, is to have a second document open and make notes as you write it for stuff you want to fix in draft 2. Momentum is huge for writing, and getting it done should be your first priority. If you keep going back and self-editing different chapters you've done before the book is finished, that's how you're going to end up with continuity errors and plot holes. Finish your work and take notes while you finish it. Any editing should be done in a smooth process with a clear beginning and end. I always finish a book, give myself a bit of a breather, finish the edit, another breather, finish the edit. Before you get into editing, you're going to want to make sure to take a step back. Give yourself a few days, maybe even a week, just so you can come in with some really fresh eyes and see what the issues are. Now, before you touch anything, you're going to want to get a plan together beforehand. You're going to want to think about what are you unhappy with and what do you know needs to be changed. Are you satisfied with all your character arcs and your plot points too? Did you accidentally drop any plot points? That's very common when you're writing because a writer has so many things to think about at once. It can be so easy for something to slip through. So make sure you double check if you accidentally dropped a plot point. And on that same topic, would some plot points be more satisfying and just better overall if you nested them into each other, as in some sprout out naturally as a result of others, or solving one helps to solve the other? Are there character moments you can add in to make people care more? And are there scenes that completely fell flat that maybe you need to totally rework or even cut out? Personally, I'm very slow to cut stuff out. I want a second person's opinion before I take out anything. At least that way they see a little bit extra and they get to decide if they also think it's not good. I would rather show them something and have them recommend that I take it out than I would take stuff out ahead of time and then they really wish I had it in. That way they get to see what they wished was in and how they might change it to be even better. Does every chapter have tension and purpose, and every scene by extension? And do your characters actually have descriptions? Do the rooms and the places they're in also have descriptions? Or do we have gray sentient blobs floating in an endless limbo? Does every chapter and plot point hit the same sort of beats? That will make it very boring and monotonous for your reader. So you may want to change up pacing or certain interactions to give a sense of uniqueness. After I come up with my general plan on how to address that, I start editing. Prose itself, you don't necessarily go into it with too much of a plan ahead of time, specifics-wise that is, because it's not like you can be expected to remember every single line that you wrote. You're going to be reading stuff and you're going to recognize it, but if I asked you what the third line of page 57 is, you're not going to be able to tell me without looking. So with prose, the only thing that you'll have an idea that you need to change ahead of time is stuff that stood out to you as like extra super bad. Other than that, you're going to have stuff that's just kind of suboptimal that needs tweaked. You're going to have regular bad stuff that needs fixed up or rewritten. Just go in there. As long as you got the big picture planned out, you can tackle prose in the heat of the moment. Now, when you go to edit, you're going to click on Save As and save this as a completely separate new document. You're going to put draft 2, draft 3, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And then in brackets, you're going to put the date that you started it. So that way, some people can misread draft 2, draft 3. They're right beside each other a lot of the time. Totally normal to accidentally click or to confuse the file name. But if you put the actual date, they'll probably be at least a few months apart, and the month will probably look completely different, at least with how it's written out. So that's a good way to differentiate, and that's a good way to make sure you don't overwrite what you have so that you can't go back. Because what if you decide you like something better before? That's why you always do it as a separate document every draft, and you edit in as non-destructive of a way as possible. Now, make sure to watch for exposition and ham-fisted passages. Exposition is like when you're forcing a bunch of extra info down a reader's throat in an unnatural way, and you're really forcing it. And by ham-fisted, I mean parts of your book where your execution is clunky and just not what you wanted. For example, is there a very tense standoff happening in your book and your reader doesn't know that it's tense until 3/4 of the way through when you say something like things are tense or tensions are high? For the specifics of your prose, your main goal should be to make sure that it flows nicely when people go to read it. You can make it really pretty and whatnot if that's what you like and if that's what your style is, but your number one most important thing for the prose should be that it doesn't interfere with the story or stand out as bad or just flat out suck. Feel free to read it out loud. Does it feel natural? Does it flow off the tongue? Is it needlessly complex? When in doubt, simplify it. You're not going to regret decomplicating your prose. And if it ends up like somebody's just saying it conversationally, your prose, that's totally okay. Are all of your sentences and paragraphs the exact same length? You're going to want to change that up. It helps with the flow and the pacing, and it keeps things more visually interesting. You can have a paragraph that's just one line. You can have a paragraph that's even just one word if you want. Are all of your sentences the same structure, as in part 1 of the sentence, comma, part 2 of the sentence? You're going to want to vary it up. You're going to want to use words like and or but to lengthen sentences, but you're also going to want to have short little ones. You could even have just single word sentences too. It's all about keeping things fresh and different, engaging, interesting, just like with paragraphs. You're going to want to make the whole thing ebb and flow. You don't have to do anything overly fancy or complicated. You just don't want it to stand out as boring and monotonous. So make sure to mix it up. Have fast parts, slow parts, medium parts. Now, there are a few words you can cut out entirely. In a lot of scenarios, you can cut out the word that and of. And I'll give an example of in a bit, but we'll start with an example of that. If I say, that's not cool, that's okay. That the word that is necessary there and I cannot take it out. But if I say, I think that that's not cool, I have two that's back to back. And that does stand out as not quite good. So you can cut out one of those that's. You can say, I think that's not cool, instead of, I think that that's not cool. You'll find a lot of scenarios where you can cut that out. As long as it flows off the tongue, makes sense, and feels better, cut it out. Even if it's not back-to-back that's, if it's a word you can cut out, you're usually good too. Now with of, an example would be all of the soldiers versus all the soldiers. You can cut out of because it still makes sense. It still flows. There's nothing wrong with that sentence. You may want to leave it in because you like the way the sentence flows with it in, but if you find it complicated and detracting in the greater sort of ecosystem of whatever paragraph it happens to be in, 9 out of 10 times your best bet is cleaning it up. You're not obligated to, but by far and wide, it's going to be the best move. Some people get a little bit nervous about doing something like that, though, because they go, well, I'm trying to be at 60,000 words, and if I cut out all of these extra filler words that make perfect grammatical sense, I'm going to end up potentially a few hundred words short, just for example. And the problem is, you don't want to actively try to hit a specific word count. You want to let the story be as long as it can be within the confines of what it is. Don't force it to be longer. Don't force it to be shorter. Let it take its own form. Now, as you're editing, you'll probably find a way where you can add in a few scenes or character moments that will compensate for cleaning up your prose, but you're definitely not going to want to downgrade the quality of your prose in the name of making your reader slog through 50 instances of, or 100 words, or maybe even 200 instances of words that you could have just cut out to begin with. Now, whatever you decide is right for you, you definitely want to cut out any instances where a sentence says had, like he had a sword, or I think that's not cool, to use that example from earlier. You want to cut out the instances of the same word being back to back. That will stand out as bad, and that will detract from the story. Remember above all else that the integrity and the quality of the art is your number one priority. You are allowed to use contractions if you want. You could say they are, you could say they're. You could only use contractions in dialogue if you want, or you could only use contractions outside of dialogue if you want. That part is really up to you and how you feel about it. And remember, no matter how good this edit is, if it's your first edit, it's not your last one. You're going to send the book to potentially a developmental editor and potentially a line editor. Then you're going to send it to a beta reader, most likely. And then you're going to send it to a copy editor. So stuff is going to change up. You can skip a developmental editor and a line editor if needed, but you're going to want to have somebody else look at it in general, because you're not going to want to be the only set of eyes on this thing. Especially a copy editor is very, very important. And you'll likely do several drafts on your own. The only thing is, I would recommend that you don't edit, or self-edit at least, after your copy editor is done with it. But if you're going to, especially don't self-edit after your proofreader goes through it, unless you notice something glaringly bad and it can't be avoided. Now that's all I have for today, so as always, make sure to like and subscribe and leave any questions you got in the comments section down below.